Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first ever linked data webinar. I am Leah DeForest, Communications Strategist with Texas Digital Library. Our webinar today is presented by Itza Carbajal, who is a Latin American Metadata Librarian at the University of Texas at Austin. Before I hand things off to Itza, I'm going to give you a brief orientation to Adobe Connect. So at first, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the way the slides appear on your screen. Itza designed a beautiful presentation, but Adobe Connect didn't want to play nicely today. So we had to switch from her PowerPoint slides to sharing a PDF, and that is why you see a little preview of the upcoming slide. But it's worth it. I apologize for the distraction, but at least we still get to see Itza's lovely presentation. So now to briefly orient you to Adobe Connect. At the top of your screen, you'll see the attendees pod that lists the hosts, presenters, and participants. In the middle of the screen, you will see the chat pod where you can type your questions and comments to everyone. You can also direct message me, the host, if you need to. We will have time at the end of the webinar for your questions, and we'll get to those questions then on a first-come, first-served basis. At the bottom left, you will see the Files pod. We've added a PDF that you can see on your screen of Itza's presentation for you to download if you like. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Itza Carbajal. Take it away, Itza.
Thank you, Leah. So I'm going to do a slow scrolling here to build emphasis. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Radical Empathy at Work Lifelong Learning and Linked Data webinar hosted by the good folks at Texas Digital Library. As Leah mentioned, my name is Itza Carbajal. I also go by Itza, in case you're wondering, and I'll be presenting this webinar on lifelong learning and linked data. Currently, I work as a Latin American Metadata Librarian for postcustodial projects here at LLILAS Benson at the University of Texas at Austin. And I'd also like to note that if you have any questions, feel free to email me. My work email is listed there, as well as you can follow me and all my work, including presentations and lectures on my website listed here as well. So we will jump right in. So motives. Why did I do this? Why did I decide to take on this very particular sort of work approach? And so I'll begin this webinar by outlining some personal and professional motives that pushed me to develop what I call the Linked Data Informal Learning Group. As I began my 2-year contract at LLILAS Benson in 2008, I immediately knew that my new position required a set of responsibilities in implementing linked data practices for our new digital repository and post-custodial collections. In looking through what is my job responsibilities, I started to pick out some things here in direct relation to what my job needed as far as linked data. Some of those included investigate use of expanded and culturally relevant subject access, help improve discoverability of LLILAS Benson post-custodial digital collections, demonstrate development and application of linked data and linked open data, as well as work with staff responsible for software development and system administration. Given my short project timeline, so I have a 2-year contract term here at LLILAS Benson, I began by identifying 4 key areas that I would focus on and how the learning sessions could be incorporated into this work. And while I was doing this, I don't think I necessarily was as intentional as I am now. So hopefully the lessons I learned will be helpful in you and not trying to do this like retrospective, a year and a half after. So in 2018, which was the first half of my contract term, I started by expanding my own understanding of linked data practices, specifically getting a better understanding of RDF and Sparkle. So I took courses at Library Juice Academy, and I engaged in deeper research on the topic. As some of y'all might be familiar, during my information studies degree, I kind of got like a very general understanding of linked data, very few opportunities to apply it. And so this first half of 2018 was really kind of an expansion on what I had learned during my master's degree. The second half of 2018, this is when I actually started holding the learning sessions on linked data with the particular goal of transferring knowledge to project team, my immediate post-custodial project team, as well as other institutional stakeholders. So now going to 2019, the first half, I stepped away from the teaching part and started to focus more on my project's immediate needs, using information and insights I gained from the discussions to develop and consult on our repository data models, practices, as well as my own metadata processing. And so now the second half, which was the last half of my project term, I'm still processing my metadata for our new digital collections, but I'm also working on drafting and proposing a plan for that initial job responsibility of expanding subject heading components as linked data. And so all during this time, I also want to acknowledge that when I was reading and doing my investigations, I came across this approach of teaching coworkers through an article titled Leading to Linking, Introducing Linked Data to Academic Library Digital Collections by Corey Lambert and Sylvia Southwick at UNLV, which gave me the concrete idea of teaching and learning opportunities focused on complex topics for those in your immediate institution. And so before I actually tell you the how, I'm going to tell you the why and what sort of considerations I tried to grapple with as I created these learning opportunities, as well as tried to balance my own work responsibilities with this sort of extra work that I created for myself. And so, innovation burnout. During my investigations, I'm a big Twitter person, so if you follow me, thank you, or if you're interested, you're also welcome to follow me. I came across this tweet by Tomas Padilla that confirmed what I then started to suspect. So Padilla, in reflecting on his work in libraries, noticed that for those working in emerging areas, his experience suggests that barriers are less about curiosity and more about time, resources, and priority. Padilla also realizes that administration generally doesn't provide real support, and oftentimes this results in a ton of burnout or the librarian as heat shield effect. As many of you may agree or not, linked data seems to be one of those emerging areas that everyone wants to talk about, but few of us know what each other means when we mention it. Less of us have concrete experiences on how to put it in practice, and even fewer have the resources such as staff, funding to hire new staff, or funding to build technical infrastructure to initiate or sustain these emerging areas and the work that it entails. So here, for clarification, I refer to burnout as a state of exhaustion that results in one being cynical about the value of one's occupation and doubtful of one's capacity to perform. During my investigations, I also began to notice a connection and tension between the constant pressure to innovate, as well as ongoing pressures to change educational structures as a result of ongoing harmful neoliberal policies. This can also be understood as a result of the do more with less mentality. Nowadays, this is a more commonly suggested approach that can be heard in academic institutional circles due to the rise of these same neoliberal policies and rhetoric that produces cuts to educational and public funding, reduction or elimination of previous staff levels, as well as prioritizing the approach such as automation that claims to provide similar results without actually having to allocate funding for employee salaries. I'd also like to mention that burnout is not a new thing, with research dating as far as the 1970s. Countless studies can be found on the topic, which leads us to discuss Padilla's next point, curiosity. So during my early investigations and discussions with my fellow colleagues here at UT, it was apparent that library staff wanted to learn more and oftentimes sought out ways to remain engaged in their work and field. But as the researchers at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence found in their 2008 study, in order to promote and foster this engagement, it is crucial to provide employees with the resources they need to do their job well, feel good about their work, and recover from work stressors experienced through this work. So while ideally, in my opinion, higher levels of staff and more equal work distribution would help alleviate some of this high workload and hopefully provide flexibility for staff to pursue non-formal learning, such as take courses like the Library Juice Academy or attend seminar, this option may not be readily available to some. So I ask us here, how can we avoid burnout, and more importantly, one of the systems of burnout, resignation? hope y'all can't hear my scrolling. So I think one of the solutions, and these discussions have been going on for I think a few years now in the archival circles, is empathy. Empathy towards other in particular. So during this time, also 2018 mostly, I started working on an article regarding the use of radical empathy as a framework for archival practice as defined by Michelle Caswell and Marie Gussie-Ford. During this time, we at LLILAS Benson hosted a webinar led by Elvia Arroyo Ramirez and Jasmine Jones that discussed radical empathy in archives. During their webinar, Arroyo and Ramirez and Jones, influenced by the work of the UCLA 6, who worked also in 2008 to advocate for short-term archivist work and better labor practices in archives, introduced what is called the fifth effective relationship, that of archivist to archivist. This relationship, like those proposed by Caswell and C4, highlight the connection people have to each other and other communities through what they call webs of responsibilities. My own connections, as you'll see here in the diagram, start off from me, the Latin American Metadata Librarian, and my own responsibilities as the hired employee working on these issues, with the priority for me to learn these concepts and for me to implement them. I quickly then started to realize that it wasn't just me. I held various responsibilities to other people, and then also other people held responsibilities to me. So by suggesting changes in work practices because of my own responsibilities, I also recognized that this would affect my project team. And my project team right now is mostly composed of 3 of us that do immediate post-custodial work, but we also have a software developer that is comprised of, say, our grant project team. And so by establishing an understanding of concepts, I thought that would prove useful for both the immediate team communication as well as the distribution of work in the long term. As this project also depends on the work of others, in particular our project developer, establishing common terminology and core understandings would also prove to be beneficial for relationship building with adjacent teams, such as IT. We have our content management system staff and other team members outside of the immediate LLILAS Benson post-custodial team. And also in the long term, I typically play the long game. I knew I was on a limited contract term. I'd be here at LLILAS Benson for 2 years. So there existed a high possibility that all the knowledge I acquired through project development would leave with me. I believe that by sharing this information, I could help build a local knowledge base in others in similar situations and environments. That would also prove beneficial to me in order for me to then have a support system to help me continue learning and maturing the work. So it kind of came full circle at the end. And so in moving towards a better understanding of radical empathy, I wanted to provide you a kind of a basic definition. And so ultimately, I hope to incorporate radical empathy into my overall archival practice by actively striving to better understand and share the feelings of others, to fundamentally change my perspective from judgmental to accepting in an attempt to be more authentically connected with others and ourselves. A radically empathetic community places this at the heart of everything that we do. This in particular helped me frame why these discussions needed to happen locally in an accessible, approachable, and welcoming environment. As people struggle to attend expensive trainings or travel to faraway conferences, being able to share my knowledge would provide opportunities for others to overcome barriers such as limited income or family caretaking responsibilities or a lack of institutional support. I'll note here that while our sessions are geared towards UT staff, anyone can attend, including students studying at our local iSchool, as well as faculty interested in learning about new areas of work, or staff from other institutions beyond UT. So I'll now transition to what I assume all of y'all are waiting is the what. What did I do? What are these learning groups or learning discussions? And as you may notice, I really like to stress the why of my work, but I'm also open to continuing this conversation outside of today's webinar if there's something I didn't cover today. So what is a UT, University of Texas, Linked Data Informal Learning Group? So in planning for these discussions, I thought a lot about what structure I could use. I perceived that staff would view these discussions as extra work or a bad use of their already limited time. I also recognize that due to the intimidating nature of the topic, I would also need to be encouraging and approachable when possible. I looked through a number of models and decided on the informal and non-formal approach in order to encourage both learning beyond formal degrees as well as fostering a spirit of constant learning in individuals. Here you'll see other options I contemplated and that you could also consider for your own initiatives. So lifelong learning is typically defined as the overarching approach to things, and that can include non-formal, informal, as well as formal education. Just means that you continue to learn throughout your whole lifespan. Skill sharing is something that you may hear in other circles as well. And so still fostering that idea of when you have a particular set of skills or knowledge, how do you share that with your coworkers? And then self-teaching and education, probably the harder one, just because it's kind of based on the individual to take the initiative to continue learning. And these informal discussions, while they never had strict assignments, there was always a really clear objective of saying, by the next meeting, if you didn't understand something, these are the resources that you have in order to better understand it, but you do have to take the initiative to be able to take that task on. And so right now, we've been able to hold our informal learning groups for what we call 2 series. They were basically 2 semesters. As I mentioned, I started in 2018, but I wasn't able to develop the syllabus for this until fall of 2018. And so what you'll see right now is how fall of 2018 actually broke down. And so you had one facilitator instructor, that was me. It was a 5-part series that ran from August to October. We covered 8 general topics, and they were all meant to sort of be introductions to the foundations of linked data, including what is a semantic web, what are some linked data principles, what is RDF, what are some discovery layers that are out there, what is graph data, what are the serializations for RDF, as well as what is Sparkle. I used a variety of teaching methods. This was really my experimental group to kind of see what worked and what didn't. And while I haven't been able to tell you like which one in fact worked the most, I do think that there was a really important emphasis on giving people time to read, because there's just so much knowledge being produced by so many people in library and archives. But when do you get a chance to actually sit down and read articles and kind of catch up? And so I would try, when possible, to give folks time during our meeting sessions to just kind of choose the article that they wanted to read and engage with it how they wanted to engage with it. I collected around 38 resources that we either read or that were shared among us. And so then we continued the discussion, because one of the big goals of having these learning groups was how can we keep momentum up to keep learning, not just about linked data, but to take the initiative to learn about these emerging areas. Because as I found out during my investigations in early 2018, there had been similar efforts before my informal learning group that just kind of fizzled out once the group kind of came to a stopping point, and some of that was intentional and some of that wasn't. And so we continued our discussions in spring of 2019. When we were wrapping up the fall discussions, we sat down to kind of think about, well, what does the next series look like? And there were a lot of participants who are interested in kind of digging deep into case studies, and more specifically case studies here at UT. As some of you know, my experience working in a large institution, oftentimes you can overlook or not be in the know about what your fellow colleagues are doing. And so we tried to approach this particular series in the spring of 2019 as an opportunity to have colleagues showcase, the amazing work that they're doing here, but also kind of bring in big questions that they might be grappling with, so that a larger group who has a similar foundation of understanding around concepts, they can help kind of assess and analyze some of these big questions. So this one was a four-part series from January to April. We did mostly 2 teaching methods, which included lectures and that case study analysis. Topics included looking at GIS as linked data, looking at archival collections as data, working with Wikidata, the use of historical periodization as linked data, and exploring more of these national linked data projects and how they related to the local ones. So we had a little bit less of resources just because as each facilitator who's mentioned up there, and I'll thank them at the end, it was up to them to decide what the reading resources were. And so it was a bit of an experiment to see how much time the facilitators actually had to build their own teaching modules, and they kind of varied between each session. And so now we'll move on to today. So we took a bit of a hiatus during the summer just because I had to focus a lot on my own post-custodial project and collection processing, but we do have plans to continue the informal learning group this fall as well as in the spring of 2020. Right now I have identified 2 facilitators, instructors, that would be me, as well as Paloma Graciani Picardo at the Harry Ransom Center. It's going to be about 6 parts, running from October to March of 2019 to 2020. And we have 3 topics proposed, including me addressing that work component of subject headings as linked data. Paloma's going to talk a little bit about using and contributing to Wikidata, and then trying to dig deeper into querying with Sparkle, which was something we weren't able to do in that first session since it was kind of the last one. We're currently designing the curriculum, and we have our first discussion scheduled for October 2019. So as I start to wrap up, I have a few lessons learned. These were just kind of the ones that stood out to me the most. And so hopefully they will kind of give you some insights as to some things that I wish I had known, or that proved helpful to kind of reflect on towards the end. I also will provide all the resources that we use during each informal learning session through a link at the end, and you have my email if you have any further questions. So firstly, I learned that the idea or goal of lifelong learning isn't really a given for staff, at least not in my local context. I think for students, yes, if you work at an academic institution, students are the ones that are meant to be learning. Faculty as well, there's a stress there. But staff not necessarily. Staff sometimes kind of gets delegated as the doers and not the learners. And so that was also kind of a cultural shift that I was trying to see if we could change. For universities also in particular, there's this expectation to innovate, just because this is a ground for changes and new ideas, and coming to learn is also here to try to come and propose new ways of doing things or better ways of doing things. But it does impact us at different times. Linked data in particular, from my investigations, it seemed that linked data as a practice was more prevalent in for-profit industry, and then it comes to the library field at a later time. And so the desire to innovate might come from particular institutions at some point, but it will eventually affect everyone, whether that's by choice or by force. And then teaching, also unless explicitly stated as a job responsibility, quickly turns into extra work. This also means that, say, for me, I don't have teaching as a core component, and neither is does my institution recognize staff as teaching staff. And so while I got support from my supervisors and my unit to do this, oftentimes there was tension between other work that kind of took priority over this. Also, as Padilla mentioned, I noticed that in library archives and information science, staff in these fields do recognize the need for change and improvements, but the real question is, like, when will they need to do this? When will they be given the time? to prepare themselves to do this? What happens if they never get the time to do this? So there really is a tension between being expected to learn things, but not necessarily given the time or space to learn. This also varies institution to institution or topic to topic. I also personally found that contract labor and the ways in which these positions get placed within institutions obstruct long-term goals of innovation by either the removal of the individual with these newly acquired skills or by limiting engagement of the individual with others because they have this really intense workload expectation and then that limited time frame. So being able to go and chat with a colleague because you want to learn from each other doesn't always take priority. So also throughout my own work, I noticed the benefit of spreading knowledge in order to alleviate workload and dependencies. And while I realize that some people may want to control or gatekeep their expertise in order to remain relevant and useful, my own personal preference is to share this information. I don't believe nor support ideas of an expert, but rather see each individual as being able to obtain different levels of understanding. I also want to stress that we all have plenty of work to go around, and so gatekeeping doesn't necessarily benefit us in the longer run, and it also prevents us from fostering this community in which we all support each other and not kind of contribute to that uneven work distribution. By creating this community of practice, as you all might have seen in an earlier slide, we can also open the door for others to support you and for you to also not function as sort of a bottleneck to other efforts because you're trying to maintain that limitations on who do you help or when do you help because you are the so-and-so expert. And so finally, as a good metadata person, I also want to encourage the practice of teaching about complex or commonly misunderstood concepts as a way to improve communication and clarify unrealistic expectations. One of the things I learned when I came onto the job was that people knew I was supposed to be working on linked data, but they didn't really know what that meant. And so sometimes people would be like, oh, you're going to do this, or other times they wouldn't really know why I was here and why I was given like these particular benefits of like learning. And so in trying to bring people along and to get everyone kind of on the same page, I think that helps a lot to kind of clarify those misunderstandings. So now I will wrap up. You'll see here, this is a bibliography of a couple of sources I used to create these slides. I believe Leah is going to be able to send this to participants later on, but I also wanted to note that on the last slide, I have most of the resources from the learning sessions, including the slides as well as the full bibliography for both series, placed on our Texas Scholar Works with the URI listed right there. But if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'm always happy to chat about this. So Leah, I'll hand it back to you if we want to start Q&A.
Perfect. Itza, thank you so much. We have plenty of time for questions for Itza today. And I think I had a question, but you just answered it. I had the pleasure of sitting in on one of the learning sessions here at UT Austin last year, and I was so impressed with your organization and the curriculum that you developed, your syllabi. And so I'm really happy to know that those really important pieces of your work are going to be available for people to look at. And so is that right, that everyone can kind of go to the handle to Texas Scholar Works and see the materials that you created for the courses?
Yes. Yeah, so you'll see the fall series will have its own bibliography, and then the spring series will too. And then each slide has sort of like a title, and the foundations one each go in order, but they are also meant to stand by themselves in case you have a particular group that has like a solid understanding of one concept but wants to kind of build off on another one.
Excellent. That's great. Thank you. I see some questions or comments being typed in chat. So Texas A&M Libraries has a question. Were there iSchool faculty or students who took part, or was it more library folks?
So I didn't see faculty attend. Um, I did reach out, but I did see students. So during the first session, which was more the foundational courses, I got a lot of students who were in the iSchool, and when I asked them why they were coming, a lot of them were also saying, well, we hear this term a lot. And we feel pressure to become like better candidates in the job market, and so we wanted to at least know what they were asking. And then in the second series, I saw a dip in students, so I didn't see as many of them coming in. But we have a listserv, and so I know students get directed there, especially from each other.
Agreed. Thanks for that question. I guess I have another question about your syllabus and the curriculum that you developed. So, did you have a model that you worked from in the way that some folks, perhaps on this webinar, might work from your model? Or, could you talk about that process of developing your curriculum?
Yeah, so I think I had to do a lot more learning around how you do this like informal, non-formal teaching, because most of my training had been towards students in more formal educational settings like a university classroom or a K through 12 classroom. And so the dynamics are just very different there.
Mhm.
I don't have those resources listed right now, but if you look through all of those like, lifelong learning models or methods, you typically will find really good toolkits. One of the biggest takeaways is teaching for folks who will come voluntarily and may not come consistently, unlike students who have supposedly paid to take a class and have some sort of buy-in in this, teaching for staff, you can't expect them to come back. You can't expect them to do assignments. You can't expect them to do the readings. You just have to take what they can give you for that hour or 2 hours, and try to empower them as much to be able to continue the learning past that discussion. One of the big things that I did learn from the first series is that longer is better, but there is a fine tuning as to how long is too long to stay within a group. Right now, I think our group at UT is much more comfortable with over an hour, but less than 2 hours, just to be able to kind of really dive deep and then come out for air once it's over and then just kind of forget about it. But we're still trying to fix that.
That's great. That's ties into a question we had from Elliot, who thanked you for the presentation. Did you find that people coming into the learning group had similar levels of expertise, or did you need to find ways to bring together people with different levels of experience with linked data?
For the first series, I definitely noticed that there was a much higher attendance at that first one, which was just a general, what is the semantic web and how does linked data tie into it? And I think a lot of people were coming from, I don't know anything except that I know this word is a thing. And then I started seeing a dip in that, but there were a solid number of people who came to 3 or more sessions. And so I also had a survey towards the end to try and figure some of these things out. And most people said that they felt more comfortable continuing the conversation because they had done those foundational levels. But then when we did the case studies, I definitely saw people just kind of come in for the topic that they were most interested in, and that their level of understanding was at least higher than the basics, but it could vary. And also, I think fields coming from like which disciplinary fields they might be most comfortable with. So for the GIS, we saw a lot more people that were looking or working with geodata versus the historical periodization. We saw more people working in the humanities.
Great. And that was a great question, Elliot. Thank you. I think too it's sort of like learning a new language, and if you don't use it, you lose it. And so for those of us where it's not directly a part of our day-to-day job, it was hard to plug that in, even though the learning was really deep and engaging. So I'm really glad that you asked that question, Elliot. And we have another question from Ruth. Were there ways you could get support to make space for people to read stuff at work and support for people with different levels of academic article experience, depending on the article?
So to make space, I think the clearest approach was to dedicate a portion of the session time to just read, and also provide the suggested readings, and guidance on, if you're here, what would be a good complementary piece. And each session kind of took different approaches to what kind of readings I would collect. So we did one around discovery layers. And so I tried to pick out different examples of discovering what. Is it AV material? Is it materials, architectural materials? Just kind of knowing who my participants might be. And as far as articles, so I picked a lot of articles, but I also would try to do blog series. And I think the topic also lends itself better for certain things. So for Sparkle, there were a lot more online tutorials on like how to do stuff. But we didn't actually get to do the activity. It was more seeing someone else do it. So I would include video tutorials, and then I did a lot of hands-on exercises that would be group exercises as well as individual exercises.
Great question, Ruth. Thank you. Another question from Texas A&M Libraries. Besides reading time, what resource do you wish you would have had more of?
So I heard from participants that they really like that hands-on component of learning. And so for the first series, we did everything from like drawing exercises. And then on the second series, we did the hands-on of kind of digging into someone else's data. So for the GIS, we were looking at some of our map collections and just kind of trying to make the connections between what we have as an institution or what we might have access to, and what kind of digital tools could we touch with it. So like Open Refine allows us to input some of our data into Wikidata automatically, and so we would have the facilitators kind of do that run for us. And so this series for the fall is kind of going back into that whole hands-on approach, by one of those being, I'm going to propose my plan for expansion of subject headings, and I want participants to kind of like really rip that plan apart and just kind of see what does it look like to propose a plan like this, and what sort of considerations do I need to have in mind, and other people need to be able to point out to their colleagues as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, A&M. We have lots of time for more questions.
I'm also open to clarifying anything, or if y'all want me to talk a little bit more about any sort of theme or topic that I've mentioned.
Laura McElfresh wants to know what your Twitter handle is.
All right, I'll give it to you. Put it in the chat.
Thank you. I have one quick question. It looks like Courtney might be typing a question too. Have you presented this webinar in any other context, or like at a conference or anything?
No, so
Not
I
this
haven't
webinar,
done a.
your presentation, sorry. Your presentation, not
Yeah,
the webinar, obviously.
no, I think when I initially was approached to do this webinar by you, Leah, and for Texas Digital Library, I thought, okay, this is where I'm going to kind of like explore what happened and what my processes were. And so I did like a very brief presentation at our digital preservation forum here at UT, but it was mostly exploring the idea of innovation burnout. And today, this is my first attempt at kind of really mapping it out and exploring more of how my frameworks were developed and where I see these efforts going.
Excellent. Well, I just was out of curiosity, wanted to know because it was a truly unique presentation and I learned a lot and it helped me think about ways that I might approach presentations as well. There's a great question from Courtney here. From a management perspective, I'm especially interested in ideas about how to break through innovation burnout and create value around work. What are some of the best methods you've seen that have addressed these things successfully? And Courtney also says thank you, and she's grateful for your work, as we all are here at TDL.
Thank you, Courtney. The innovation burnout is a really interesting and I suspect much more complex topic than I was able to touch upon today. Just because there's so many factors contributing to that burnout that can be both based on an individual as well as like cultural practices at work environments. Hold on. And so the best methods, I really believe in kind of the distribution of knowledge as a way to allow people who may not be seen as the experts on certain topics to kind of take the lead on some of these things and not expect that to be done by certain individuals. And while I understand that there are certain job responsibilities that take precedence over others. So for me, linked data is explicitly stated in my job responsibilities. I also really encourage my project team to know what I know so that if I ever needed help, I wouldn't need to either, place something unreasonable on them or have to bring them up to speed. And so just really kind of walking people with you instead of trying to like run ahead and leave people behind kind of. But I do think that there is opportunity for more discussions about that in particular.
Agreed, and I wonder if there might be an answer or a strategy in the maintainers movement. I feel like that movement is getting to the core of that empathetic approach and appreciating, showing, sharing, celebrating, and appreciating work being done.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of them. Looks like
Yeah,
Courtney is typing too. Sorry, Itza, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, I was going to say that the kind of like celebrating also I I haven't been able to talk about this with the other facilitators, but during our second series, I think it was really useful to provide a platform for my other colleagues to be able to say, oh, they're not using the word link data, but they either are really great candidates to kind of jump into this emerging area energy and momentum, or they have been doing this and they haven't had either the chance or the time or the opportunity to really kind of flex that work. And so I liked being able to use my privilege of having attention on me because I use this term and then being able to say, well, have you heard about my colleagues' work, Paloma, at the Harry Ransom Center, or the folks at the main library around GIS, including Michael and Jessica. And before, if anyone has any other questions, I really do want to thank Paloma, Michael, Jessica, Adam, Josh, Katie, because they really, after that first series where I I don't think I started to experience burnout, but I definitely wanted to avoid it. They really stepped up, and even though they had all other kinds of immediate work responsibilities, they took on the role of facilitator, which is a different sort of way of engaging, and kept that momentum up and kind of helped me be able to recover.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm familiar with all the folks that you mentioned, and those are some extremely generous people, which in a sea of librarians who are by nature extremely generous with their knowledge and their time, those are definitely some of the most. And Courtney made another good point, which um, back to that avoiding innovation burnout, just de-emphasizing expertise and the rock star syndrome. You know, it's great for whoever the rock star is, but sometimes those of us in the audience are like, what about me? So I can totally see that point too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Still time for more questions. Oh, sometimes not all is great for the rock star either, says Courtney, and I can imagine too.
Hmm.
Ruth, true facts. Great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I when I was reading more about burnout, where it was just like there is a lot more discussion around those who are most highly engaged and kind of get that spotlight more frequently also get asked to do more a lot of times. And so then the likelihood that someone's gonna just continue to say yes to things is just going to speed up that burnout and then perhaps not only cause physical and emotional damage, but damage their ability to continue that rock star status.
Well said. Very well said. There's a saying that I've heard, which is if you want help at work, look for the busiest person and ask them. So I really see truth in your words there. For me, this was an introduction to radical empathy in the workplace, and so I feel so lucky to have uh, been able to sit in on this webinar, and I'm going to pour back over your slides and bibliography. I'm not seeing any more questions come in, so we might all get, 15-ish minutes back in our day, which I'm sure we could all use, maybe even like have lunch. Um, but I do just, again, I hope that all of you are inspired to take the plunge as Itza did, start a learning program. You've got anyone on this webinar is able to help you, you can lean on us, TDL, you can lean on each other. And certainly want to thank you, Itza. You're a very important leader and an invaluable voice in the field, and we just so appreciate to you taking the time to give us this comprehensive look at your work and sharing your knowledge with us today.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
unless there's any other comments or questions, I think we'll stop recording and wrap it up.
Okay. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Itza.